market along in a short pick. Vince LoRusso, President and CEO at Clo Capital Partners. Vince, welcome back to the Schwab Network, sir.
Thanks, Ollie. Nice to see you.
Absolutely. I'm always excited to see you and hear about your stock picking method and your very good details. But I'm kind of like dreading this conversation because your long pick is a funeral home business or something.
It's true, Ollie. Thanks for the setup here. I hope I don't disappoint. But
the Patrick Bateman's finance
SCI
TV show.
Well, as an asset manager, as a portfolio manager, we have to look across the equity universe for interesting ideas that are right for the environment. And truth be told, this has been a company that I've been following for many years. I'm really impressed with the management team. As you mentioned, the industry is not that glamorous, but the death care industry in the United States is a large business, and SCI has the leading market share. They've got a 15 to 16% market share of revenues, and they really are professional operators. I mean, when you think about the needs at that time for as folks think about pre-need purchases of funeral plots and cemetery services, they really have proven to be very professional and honorable operators, and I think that's one of the reasons they've been able to grow the market share and run a really compelling business that, as equity holders, we think it's a compelling position.
All right. Well, I sure have heard a heck of a lot of really logically, fundamentally sound healthcare theses based on the aging demographic. So I guess it makes sense to just project out to the next level. So I feel like that about sums it up pretty well, right? I mean, there's a reason why people want to own a bunch of healthcare companies. Might as well throw a funeral home in.
Well, as I think Ben Franklin is credited with saying, death and taxes are the two sure things. And, demographics play a role. But again, as operators, this management team has done a really good job of, being stewards of capital. So share buybacks, a dividend, tuck-in acquisitions. They actually grow EPS at about 8 to 12%. That's their model for EPS growth. They've been able to demonstrate that for a very long time. As we think about some of the volatility in the capital markets and what's going on with the consumer and credit, they have a level of visibility that goes beyond mortality and demographics. They actually have $14 billion of pre-need sales, which is sales that have already been recognized, not in a GAAP perspective because they haven't delivered the service. But folks, if you think about, in their mid-60s, start thinking about this planning, this stage of their life, it's not uncommon for folks to buy a funeral plot and to prepare for the services and to actually engage in a contract to take care of this need. But SCI doesn't recognize that revenue until they deliver the service. And it's just a staggering number in my opinion, but with that market share and for, executing so well for so long, they now have $14 billion of what we call pre-need sales that have already been made, but not yet recognized.
It's a big backlog. If I were their marketing team, I would suggest that they adopt a spokesperson in the actor who plays Wags from Billions, because there's a great funeral and plot picking scene in that show. That's probably the best 3 minutes from that show. I don't know if you watch Billions, but that's a great...
I remember that. I don't remember what Wags paid for that plot. That's far above the average
exactly.
price that SCI recognizes, but I do remember.
All right. Hey, let's talk your short, Yeti. I mean, it seems like they're doing a decent job getting people to pay silly amounts of money for coffee mugs and stuff. What's wrong with them?
It's a brand that people like, and they've been doing a really good job of that for a long time. What we're starting to think about from the perspective of somebody who's short Yeti in our long short fund CBLS, we think there's some maturation in that category, and there's also some increased competition. And what we're seeing is that Yeti's starting to lose some shelf space. In fact, one of the things that sort of happened out of this holiday stretch is some viral videos of some of the competitors' offerings that consumers are clamoring to purchase. I mean, you think about distribution through something like Dick's Sporting Goods and some of the more local and regional distributors that have been prominently featuring Yeti for now several years. We're starting to see some of that shelf space migrate over to other partners. One of the things that Yeti might be navigating here is that they've done such a good job, as you mentioned, Ollie, on the DTC or direct-to-consumer channel. It's more than half their business, and I think some of the retailers might be perceiving them to be a competitor now as much or more so than a partner. And that is opening the door for a company like Stanley, and the Stanley Cup phenomenon seems to be getting some traction. So, the product is great, it works, but the stock at 18 times earnings in a maturing category with increased competition, to us looks like a good short position for our shareholders in CBLS.
Is that earnings? I mean, 18 doesn't sound super high compared to the market at this point. What metric is that?
Yeah, that's fair, Ollie, compared to the market. But this is a consumer company. It's a discretionary purchase. You're thinking about something that has, as I mentioned, a lot of competition. And typically you look at companies in that category when they start to reach maturation closer to 12 times earnings. So it's not purely a valuation short. I mean, we're interested to see how they navigated the holidays. They've had to deal with a recall. We think this increased competition and loss of shelf space are all fundamental catalysts to the downside, potentially impacting earnings. But we might get, some lower earnings, but also some multiple contraction. That 18 times is not very expensive relative to, some of the technology companies and faster growth companies, but they don't want to mature into a 12 times, PE multiple from the 18 that they sit at today. And we think that might happen.
Okay. Well, I've also heard people talking about some other like new coolers people are using with the big straws and stuff. I'm blanking on the brand name right now, but there's another one that's really popular.
Well, Stanley Cup seems to be the big one, but
that's it.
Also in that space.
Okay, yeah, that's it. That's the one you mentioned, Stanley. All right, so I mean, preference and popularity can be a fickle thing. Whims can be fickle, but it does seem like this is like almost a meme product, a kind of one of those things that seems like they're a product of zero interest rate and easy money world. That none of those products have gone away though, Vince. They're all still here.
Yeah, they won't go away, but it is one of those products that with easy money, as you mentioned, and going back to the COVID phenomenon of folks being outdoors more and traveling more, with things like coolers and campers and fishing rods and Yeti mugs. That was a great period. They introduced a fine product at the right time, and I think to a large degree they capitalized on it. But it's that transition to a more mature business with more competition as the consumer starts to pull back in some of those areas that's creating the catalyst, we think.
Okay. All right. Like the case, I just feel like you got to get some more tightening in policy to really suck that Yeti cash flow out. Because, you still got the coins and stuff going crazy, Vince. Bitcoin's $50,000 almost. We can afford a $100 mug. You nuts? Great to catch up, Mr. LoRusso.
Yeah, well, we'll circle back and see how we did with this one. But I do think the Fed might go easier on policy as opposed to tighter soon. But the consumer part of this equation is starting to show a little bit of signs of fatigue.
Love it. Appreciate it as always. Thanks a lot. Vince LoRusso.
Thanks, Ali.
Joining us from Clo Capital Partners.